How's it going? As you can see, I've got all my notes. I'm very prepared. Got a PowerPoint with no pictures and no words. That's it. That's it there. That's my PowerPoint. It's just one page, my name. Screenwriters Lecture Series. British Academy of Film and Television Arts. And supported by the JJ Charitable Trust and at BAFTA Guru. That's some of my text that I put in there, just to prove I did write something. I've eaten up a good 2 minutes. Only 86 to go. Okay, the word lecture, this is a loose term, really, isn't it, lecture? I'm here to talk to you guys about screenwriting. I don't know much about screenwriting, but I thought that what would be nice for us, and for me, is just have a conversation with you guys, which would get me off the hook in a big way, having no notes and nothing prepared. Which is kind of how I've operated in the, you should not take any photos. I do not want a record of this. It should be deleted from everyone's memories at 4 p.m. Thanks for having me, BAFTA and JJ Charitable Trust. It's lovely to be here. I've got a really sore head. Last night, I was at a bar, and I smashed my head into a bookcase. And so I've got this aching headache right here, right just here. So if anyone has, I've had 2 paracetamol, but if anyone has any more, just throw them up here. But I'm on the water, so it's going great. Now, screenwriting. What do we know about screenwriting? Where do we start? At the beginning. Title page. The thing is, you need a good title page. That's where all scripts, in my experience, live and die on the title page. And a good title. What are your favourite titles? Of movies. Just throw them out there. Boy. My film. Simple. It's just a 3-letter word, boy. And it says it all, doesn't it? Okay, page 1. After the title page, you need to start at page 1. And that's where all good scripts start. And you need to start with either interior or exterior. So you also need to be good at typing. Now, you're either a fast typer or a slow typer. I'm a fast typer, but I'm slow at ideas. So most of my scripts have taken, this is the truth, probably about 7 years between writing and getting made. I first started, so we're segueing into actually the real talk now. Filmmaking was never really my dream. Wasn't my top shelf dream. It was sort of like a lower level, bottom shelf dream. I had other dreams that I didn't achieve, so disappointed. Very disappointed in that, but bittersweet because also now I'm rich. So sometimes you just got to take one for the team, and you just got to swallow that pill and get a career in film. So yeah, you just got to do that. I started off as an illustrator and painter, and my background is visual arts. It's hot in here, and so that was my dad was a painter. He was a painter and a farmer. My mother was a school teacher, and for punishment, she would make me analyse poems. And like William Blake poems, she'd say, "You've been bad, now I want you to write an essay on this William Blake poem." Bitch. And so, so I used to have to do that. And so I was really, I wasn't ever forced or encouraged to do things outside of the arts, because both my parents were into the arts and they wanted me to do that. So I was encouraged to pursue that, and I'm very thankful for that. So most of my life was spent doing music and drama and art, and eventually in my late 20s, I decided to write that short film, which is actually better than that when you can hear the dialogue. But that was something that I was already writing a lot of comedy and doing stand-up and a lot of sketches and plays and stuff with my friends, because no one would hire us to do like the Labute plays and shit. So like we would be forced to make our own stuff up and make our own props and be more inventive with how we tried to tell our stories. And at the time in New Zealand, there wasn't a lot of comedy going on. Well, a lot of the comedy was very, it was pretty boring, and it was, I think a friend of mine went to pitch a TV show at TVNZ, and they said, can't you just make it more like Friends? And which is basically what we did. We would just say, what's America making? And then we'd copy that. And so that was like the extent of what we were doing in comedy on TV. So we just basically tried to swim against that tide, and we just did these strange sketches and weird things. It's just Jermaine and Brett and I and a few other people. And so we kind of created our own style of comedy, I guess, or our own style of storytelling, our own style of writing. And eventually people ended up liking it. And then in my late 20s, I started writing films just because I had not tried it before. And I wrote that. I actually wrote that as a play, sort of like for myself and maybe a couple of friends to play these kids in like a one-act play. And I sent that script to a friend of mine who was a producer, a film producer, and she suggested that we turn it into a short film. And then we did that, and then that got nominated for an Oscar, and then lost. And so there's another failure in my life. Just lots of disappointments, really, one after the other. And so but then the good thing was I got encouraged to keep writing more and to keep trying to experiment and follow this path. And then I did a few more short films, and some were made, a lot weren't. And then eventually I got to go to the Sundance Labs with my first feature script, which was for Eagle vs. Shark. And that sort of changed everything for me when I realized that screenwriting could be, that writing films or telling stories could be so much bigger than what I originally had thought it could be, which, you know, New Zealand, our cinema at the time was basically, as Sam Neill coined the phrase, the cinema of the unease, which is basically depressing, it's raining all the time, and someone definitely dies, and there's definitely a ghost in the film. So we all kind of came through at a time when I think the film industry in New Zealand needed a break from that, or just needed to go in a new direction. And so I was very lucky to kind of sort of just catch that little wave. It was a very little wave. And then made my first feature, and then keep getting encouraged to make more and more and more. And so I really fell in love with film, sort of like an arranged marriage, really, just sort of fell in love with it because I was encouraged to. And now I'm definitely in love. But I was never someone who was like an 8-year-old running around with a camera, you know, dreaming of making films like, you know, Spielberg and those guys. So it was, but I'm actually glad that I spent, you know, 28 years getting experiences in other areas and doing many other jobs and doing shitty jobs and doing, you know, like diving for seaweed as a job, and definitely hospitality, and yeah, just all sorts of things just to get by. But I think there's a lot of experiences in that I've always drawn on, which has helped me a lot in my writing. So whenever people say, "Oh, it's a shitty job, I just want to like make my first feature by the time I'm 21," if you are a certain type of person, great. But for me, I think if I'd made a feature at 21, it would have been terrible, and I wouldn't be here. So I'm really thankful that I had that time, that lead up of about 28 years, to get experiences, which I still draw on today. The end, bye. So, that's that bit. Questions? Is it your turn to come up now and chat with me? Okay, well that's the introduction. We're going great, and we are going to get into. I do really want to have a conversation. I think the best way of either learning or finding out about other artists is just talking to them instead of just watching films. So we're going to do that eventually. But first, you and I are going to have a conversation. I'm going to move over to this area.
So apparently the short film is ready to watch, so we'll play that right at the end of the talk. Fingers crossed. Let's begin with kind of thematics and going on from Two Cars One Night, a film that seems deeply personal and about childhood, and perhaps a childhood that is reflective of your own experience. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. So that film is set in outside a pub that I used to sit outside when I was a kid in cars, and I'd never really seen anything like all of our short films in New Zealand up until then they always had a punchline. So it was always like, oh, it's the same guy, but it's a different day. And it's like, oh, it's like Groundhog Day. But it's like, so 8 minutes of going, what's going on? Oh, I get it. He's a time traveler. But for me, I wanted to do something that felt like part of a bigger thing, and it was more of a snapshot, and just something that felt a little more poetic and didn't have a punchline at all. There's no punchline in that.
There's a certain melancholy as well.
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah, but that also, I think that set the tone for a lot of the things that I've made, which is a mixture of melancholy and comedy, and it's. I don't think you can ever say my films are straight up comedies, because my films are comedies with lots of slow bits where there's no laughs, or they're dramas which are too funny. Yeah. Touching comedies.
Tragic comedies. We'll skip ahead, if we can, to Boy, just because I think the theme of childhood from Two Cars One Night, Boy, and then Hunt for the Wilderpeople is something that you explore you write children really well.
I don't like kids.
Your own?
I like my own.
Yeah, okay. They're nuanced and they're fallible, and they're the way that kids are. Where has kind of that exploration of childhood come from? Why is that a constant thread?
I think because when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time by myself or with my friends, and not a lot of time with grown-ups. Or I'd say that the grown-ups around us were very unreliable, and so I learned early on that you can't really trust them. You can't trust grown-ups, really. I think I'm trustworthy, but back then, when I was growing up, you really just sort of had to make do with what you had and make your own fun and make your own dinner and basically survive and keep yourself alive. And so my family and I and all the kids I grew up with, we all grew up. So Boy is set in the house that I grew up in, and a lot of my family is in the film, and Two Cars is a kind of it's sort of like a precursor to that film, in that it's very specific to how I grew up, and I never have lamented that or felt like I need some sort of pity, or that these films are an exorcism of like my trauma, but I think that there's a lot of funny parts to that, and so that's why. So Boy essentially is a comedy about child neglect, and then there's something that like you guys get it here. In America, they were very uncomfortable with that film because they just did not like the idea that parents could be that useless, and so yeah. But in New Zealand, we find that kind of stuff really funny, and I'm sure you guys do as well.
Let's actually take it.
Yeah. Who finds child abuse funny?
Yeah.
So growing up, we basically controlled our own worlds, and I think that's why I've always been drawn to the idea of like seeing this world that shitty grown-ups are creating through the lens of someone who's more innocent and who is actually probably more wise and has a little bit more perspective, like a better perspective on things than we do. And same with acting. Like I think that child actors, especially if they're untrained, are infinitely better than grown-up actors because they don't process shit and they don't go, oh god, what's my backstory? When I was abused, my character was abused this morning. Do I have to take that with me? They just want to say the lines and then eat the free food, and so it's very like pure. So they're not clouded with all this sort of crap that we carry along when we're trying to act, which is like, what's my motivation in this scene? Which I think is sort of stupid, really.
But you write that purity really well, especially in Boy, in the sense that his imagined world of where his father is and who he's been is something kind of, that's another layer that's added kind of within your writing of it. In terms of the writing of something like Boy, because there are kind of, his is a principal perspective, but we do go to other perspectives. What's your process in terms of sitting down and doing it? Is it visual? Is it just at a desk on your own?
Well, a lot of it comes from, like, especially with those films, comes from just trying to capture things that I remember doing when I was a kid, and so part of Boy is this kid who he fantasizes that his dad is Michael Jackson, and that he's like off, doing all these amazing things overseas, and that's exactly how we used to talk. It was like, when our parents went around or our dads went around, we'd say, like, I remember saying that my dad, like, he was like this deep sea, like, exploration diver. He was like off on some like rig in the Indian Ocean and stuff. And so, but we were like, and we all knew we were lying, when we were like lying in bed and stuff and saying these ridiculous, making up these ridiculous tales about our parents. But there was something kind of cool that we were trying to top each other with these imaginative like excuses of why our parents went around. And so I really loved that idea of just, we thought that Bob Marley was from a tribe down the road. I really did think that. And so it's all tapping into that kind of thing, where the imagination actually is stronger than reality, and it can actually eclipse reality in a lot of ways.
Because Boy is so personal, and perhaps based on people that you know and part of your childhood, do you ever feel a responsibility in terms of what people's perception may be of those communities?
No. And I've had people, and usually white people, say like, you really didn't paint the Maori community in a good light in that movie, and I'm like, bitch, please. And then some people say, like, and some of the review, like one review we got, which was saying that it was like sort of saying the same thing, and then saying that the film wasn't culturally specific enough, and that basically what they're saying is that there weren't enough people riding whales and shit in the film. So, that it was like there weren't enough ghosts and people like talking to trees and spirits and shit. And so, but yeah, I don't feel that. I feel the responsibility to my community and to the Maori community, just in terms of wanting to inspire people to get to do other jobs or to do what I'm doing, or, and I think I've succeeded in that respect, because there are now a lot of youth who want to get into filmmaking or storytelling, which is, we're an oral culture, so but most of all of our history has been passed down through story and through through song and through dance and through just telling stories, which is where myth comes from, and where the retelling of a simple story just gets more and more outlandish, and which is where Maui, all the exploits of Maui comes from, which is he was probably a dude who cut down a tree with like a tiny little rock once, and then that story just went into like fishing up islands and slowing the sun in like over 1,000 years. So, but I think that's really great because there's no real. I mean, what is the truth in history? And we still can't really rely on books because it's still one person's telling of history. So, what's the difference between a book and stories that are passed down from generation to generation just through songs or through a verbal telling? So my responsibility really is, I see it as to encourage young people in our community to embrace storytelling again, which is, I think, one of our strengths. That's something that's been lost over the years because we've been encouraged to do other things. And in my town when I was growing up, there were only 2 jobs really. There was like either driving, working in the forestry, or driving a truck that took the wood out of the forestry. So that was it, or maybe working on the water, fishing, or growing dope. And so that was like, so there was. We all know which one pays the best. So those were the options. And if you were to say, as a kid, I mean, no one would, because I never heard it, like, oh, and be a filmmaker. You would never have heard that. But now, you hear it all the time. And not just because of me, but because of a lot of other, it's like my friends and peers, Maori filmmakers, who are doing similar things to me.
Okay.
I've got a microphone right here, so if I'm like, got this like burpee thing going on, and then you hear that,
Hangover.
you're welcome. All part of my gift to you.
Thank you. Sticking with childhood, and Hunt for the Wilderpeople broke box office records in New Zealand.
Yes, it made 50,000. No, it made a lot of money, and you guys' pound isn't worth that much anymore. They get too snobby about it.
But your first adaptation.
Hunt for the Wilderpeople.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was it from having your own voice and being so distinctive in your voice, and that, again, being different in every project you've done, but then adapting someone else's work? How did it come about?
I was approached to adapt this book by a writer called Barry Crump, who is very famous in New Zealand, and the book is not really that much like the film. The book's not funny, and I had added a lot more characters and tried to make it sort of my own thing. But I wrote the first draft in 2005, and it was back then when I thought I was like this.
That was straight after 2 Cars, One Night. So
it was before I'd made anything. After the short films, yeah. But before I'd shot my first feature, and I wrote that, and I was like very much into being a very kind of, I was wanting to make like Korean cinema and like sort of, like be like Von Trier and stuff, and like, dark and depressing New Zealand films. And so in that version of the script, there were basically no jokes. Sam Neill's character dies at the end. He gets shot to death by the cops. And like the kid goes back into foster care, and that's how it ends. No, he doesn't go back into foster care, he starts living on the streets. That's how the film ended. This is him living in a park, a 12-year-old. What's wrong with me? So then I put that aside, and I went and made a few other films, and then kind of got a taste for like what my style is, or like the kind of stories I wanted to tell. And then and over the years realized it's okay to put ridiculous shit in movies, and it's like the world needs stupid stuff, and also you need heart and stuff, but you need jokes. Like the world needs to laugh, and also I just couldn't really see myself making super depressing like horrible movies. Cannes movies. So if I wanted like any of my films to go to Cannes, if I wanted Hunt for the Wilderpeople to go to Cannes, everyone would have been dead and prostitutes. So
there is that thing though with comedy. Do you think that drama is something that is revered by festivals or sometimes worldwide, but comedy is?
I know it's so dumb. Because comedy's so much harder to do,
and especially when it's something tragic.
Yeah, in a drama, if no one laughs, that's good. In a comedy, if no one laughs, then you're dead. So in a drama, it's like you can't. I consider it to be a little easier because it's just say the words and don't make me laugh. That's your job as an actor in a drama. Just don't make anyone crack up. So, but in the comedy, it's infinitely harder to just sort of to shape it and to keep the laughter going, and then to know how to balance the flow of it, and then are there too many? Like in what we do in the shadows, we did cuts where it was like we had to concentrate on the story and at the expense of a lot of the jokes. And then we did another cut where it was all jokes and not much story, and neither of them worked. The one that was full of jokes, no one cared about the characters, and they were like on their phone. They were like, "That's funny. It's always funny, but I don't care about anyone. I'm just on my phone." And I was looking, and the drama one, I mean, the story version was just boring.
How do you test those things, though?
We just test them with friends, right? Yeah.
Do you have a trusted group of people that?
Yeah. I mean, they're usually just people that you've met anywhere. Like you start running out of people. So like one of the last test screenings we did of What We Do in the Shadows was at my house with one person, and that was basically our last friend, and he's in the movie, and so it was like me, Jermaine, and him in my lounge room, and just Jermaine and I just looking at him. He's not laughing. And so you do run out of friends, but we always test. I'm always testing my films, and sometimes you don't even need to ask them questions afterwards. Sometimes it's just being in a room with some other people. And what I do is I watch my films, and as soon I'd make a note of the time of when I feel embarrassed, and then that's my notes. I'm like, at 1 hour. I felt pretty shitty, and like I really wanted to disappear into a corner, and then I know to go and have a look at that section.
What We Did in the Shadows. So you co-wrote that with Jermaine Clement.
Yeah.
What are the differences in co-writing? How does it work? How do you write with him? What's the process?
It's just slower. Well, Wilderpeople took 10 years. This one we came up with the idea in 2005, and we shot it in 2012.
A lot happened in 2005.
Yeah. Oh, it was a good year. I'm really what I want to get. I've started, so I want to get them all out. When you start with these things, you just got to do it. I wouldn't be able to sit here for the rest of the afternoon knowing that they weren't all taken out.
So a slow process.
Hang on.
I'm rushing the process, sorry.
Yeah. No, we've got plenty of time. Nearly done. Oh, this feels so good. Satisfying. Last little bit. Okay, good. Yes. Okay. Didn't need an applause, but I accept it. That's a little triumph for me today. Put that in the coffee cup. So, what was the question? We're talking about the script. Yeah. So Jermaine and I came up with the idea in 2005, and I think we write together well, but it's excruciatingly slow. So we spent maybe 6 or 7 years writing that, and I don't even know why, because we didn't even show it to the cast. We didn't show the script to anyone other than the HODs, and because we improvised basically the whole film. We knew, like, going into a scene what we wanted to do, and so we'd get the cast in, and then we'd say, okay, so in this scene, so like one example, like Stu came in one day, and we said, oh, Stu, just lie down here in the grass, and we just started pouring blood all over him, and he was like, is my character dead? And so we didn't tell anyone really what was happening to their characters, just because we wanted it to really feel like a documentary. So people would say, here's the goal from the beginning of the scene to the end of the scene. You have to get this achieved. You have to, here's your mission is to convince this person to do this, or murder this person or something. And so, which was good. So every take was very different. And at the end of the filming, we had about 150 hours of footage that we had to get down to about 90 minutes. So it took 14 months to edit. So we were going through everything, and every take was completely different. And so we built the interior of the house, and we pre-lit everything so that we could go into any room we wanted. And we had 3 cameras running all the time. Sometimes we'd say, okay, we'll just stick with this character, and halfway through the scene, and most of the scenes were like 10-minute takes, 15-minute takes, and so halfway through a scene, maybe a character would go, fuck this, I'm out of here, and walk, and then the camera would follow them into their bedroom and just sit with them for a bit as they were sitting there fuming about something, and then they'd come back, so everything was very different, and there was a very different style different style of writing as well, where Jermaine and I were in New York for about 6 months, and we would meet up every day at about 2 p.m. at this cafe and have some avocado and toast, and then write like 2 sentences over 3 hours, and then look at, and we'd just sit there in silence. This is how we write: sit there in silence, and then Jermaine would go, "What if Stu turns into a werewolf?" Okay. Okay, I'm going to go to dinner, see you later. And then we're just that was it. Or send each other an email and it'd be like 1 sentence. I was thinking maybe they go flying with Nick. Okay, cool. And that was it. So it was really long. I don't recommend that.
In terms of getting it funded then, if you didn't have a kind of physical completed script when you were shooting, is that correct?
We had a script. We had a good script.
Yeah.
The script was actually pretty good, but we just didn't show it to any to this. I mean, we shot the script, but we would everyone else would have sides, and they'd have a version that they just wouldn't show the actors. Yeah. The actors just weren't allowed to see stuff.
And it was funded by the New Zealand Film?
They gave us a little bit of money, but it was also we had private funding. Private, which means I can't tell you where it came from. Yeah. They want to remain private. But that was really fun. It was a great way of shooting, and there's I think a lot of people don't consider improvising to be part of the writing process, but I do think it is. I think if you're coming up with stuff and it's adding to the character or it's changing the story in some way, then I do think that's writing, even though the actors don't get a credit for that.
And that's now developed into
the
TV show.
TV spin-off, yeah. 2 TV spin-offs. Yeah.
Yeah, not just one. 2.
Yeah, one that follows the 2 cops, and that's sort of like a boring X-Files. Set in New Zealand with the 2 cops investigating paranormal events around Wellington. Yeah. Going to season 2. I mean, how long can you stretch that idea out for? And then the other one is a spin-off of Shadows, which is set in America with new vampires. It's in the same universe where our characters would be in New Zealand at the same time. It's just different documentary crew following these guys around, and our characters may or may not come in to some of these episodes as well. But yeah, Matt Berry's in that, Natasha Demetria. Is
there more pressure on that then in terms of script, or is it still you and Jermaine, or are you doing writing?
I didn't really do any writing on that because I was doing some other stuff. But yeah, it's pretty similar. Jermaine's been doing most of the writing with a writing team, and I'm just going to go and direct some of them.
I'm going to open it up to the audience. Right. Oh, okay. We've got hands already. Okay. We have the microphone in the 4th row here.
Just a couple of questions. One, first, thank you, but it's impossible.
Not a question.
It's impossible to find any of your scripts online. I searched for like all of them, and it's nearly impossible to download them. The closest thing that I came to was an auction of one of your scripts in New Zealand, an actual printed copy.
There's one copy of all the scripts, paper.
Is
The
it
New
like,
Zealand government has that.
Will there? Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. No. Would there ever be available, or is there?
I'm
anywhere
sure they
can
are.
be found?
I feel it. No, they're not.
No, it's
That's
quite
odd.
It's quite tricky.
Give me your email. I'll just email.
And,
the
well,
scripts.
that one's kind of like, yeah, I wanted
I feel like they should be available. I
Hunt for
feel like they
Wilder
should.
People, because one thing that was really beautiful was that Bella is hardly in the film, but it's like her presence is just so strong throughout, and she influences everything, and it's something that I wanted to see in the script. Obviously, I've not been able to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that script, the Hunt for the Wilder People, I didn't really diverge much from that script because it was a very short shoot, and we were really, because we were shooting outside and this limited day, we were shooting in winter as well, so it was like short days and really harsh conditions, and so there wasn't a lot of time to just improvise or to kind of go off script. So I stuck to that script quite strictly. Can they be found online? That is a good question. I don't know. I thought that they would be all online. I don't, and I apologise if they're not.
Hiya. I'd be really keen to know how because you have a brilliantly specific vision, and I'd love to know how you stay true when you talked about the different versions of Wilderpeople, the really dark one and the one you ended up with, how you stay true to your vision when that script's out to market. Because I remember meeting Carth, you pitching Wilderpeople like 3 years before you made it. How do you hold on to it when financiers might be trying to pull it in all sorts of different directions?
I think because we don't ask for much money in New Zealand, so it's not like they're like, oh yeah, well if Tom Cruise was playing the kid, I'm going to give you your $3 million.
So, but how do you deal with that pressure then ratcheting up when you're on Ragnarok?
Well, that was very different because it's that was not. I was like just pulled in to do that, and that was not my it wasn't my idea or my my IP or anything. So. But with all my
got your voice though through it. It's definitely.
Oh, it definitely has got like literally got. But yeah, that.
How did you implement?
I was very lucky with that because I was obviously nervous about working with a studio, in general. But I did 2 pitches with them, and the pitches were really like one of them was just to kind of like give a tonal idea of what I wanted to do, and then I made this little reel of just basically ripping clips from lots and lots of movies that looked exciting, and then put Immigrant Song over the top of it, and that seemed to work. And then even in the picture, they're like, oh, this is a cool song. Who's this? I'm like, oh, what? And then they basically brought the song, and knowing that they wanted to use it somehow in the film. But pitching, I think, is really just, it's less about your idea and more about sussing each other out and figuring out if you can bear to work with each other for 2 years. And I found them really lovely people, and so I ended up kind of just subtly pushing my voice and tone and stuff into the film from the beginning. But they wouldn't have hired me unless they had seen those other films and had known that somehow that tone was going to end up in there.
Hi, I suppose it's kind of similar, but I'm kind of at the start of my career, and I guess I was interested in, like, structurally, a lot of the decision makers are white. So when you're trying to explore themes that are culturally to do with your heritage, and largely the gaze might, have a certain perception of how it should be, have you ever had to kind of deal with managing kind of, I suppose, notes and feedback? Because I think it's about trying to stay true and have integrity in what you make, but then when people who've got certain power kind of instill their beliefs in a way that you just don't agree with, but they're calling the shots to some degree. I'm really curious how you kind of navigate that, because I think I've started to experience it in some ways, but I'm sure it's just the beginning. So.
Well, one good trick is to put something in the script that's so is going to trigger them and like is going to distract them so much that they've kind of like they don't notice your things that you really want to be in the script. Or other times you just like save it till the very last. So sometimes what I would do is know that I was going to have a certain joke or a certain moment or a certain scene, and then wait until it got financed, and then put it in like the day before shooting.
Tactical, like it.
Yeah, it's all tactics. And so, and then, other times you'd go, and then, and then like Ricky's walking along, and then he falls through a trapdoor, and then slides down through the earth into like a fantastical land full of dragons and stuff. And they're like, oh, I don't know about this dragon thing. But meanwhile, you've on either side of that, you've put in these like the things that you really want in the movie. So that I think that works sometimes, but also I think it gets easier the more, obviously, the more that you do, and like they don't fuck with me anymore. They were like, well, also I haven't worked with the Film Commission for a long time, and they were always pretty respectful of my stuff. I think just because they didn't really know what I was really trying to do, and they were like, oh, yeah, let's see what happens. And because all my films did well in New Zealand, they, the more and more that happened, they like kind of just went, okay, you can just do another film, I guess. But when I was starting off, I could have easily just taken all the notes and just listened to them. And one thing, I love the way that we finance films in New Zealand, but one of the problems we've always had in development has been that the development staff come in and they only have like a 2 or 3 year tenure. So by the time you've like done all the notes and you've developed the script for 2 years, then new people come in. And then they read the script and they go, oh, what's this? No, go back to the first draft. And then so you start the development. So I know people who have gone through development at the Film Commission years ago, like in the early 2000s, who had been developing scripts for like 8 years with them and just going out of their minds because they were just, putting all of their eggs into that basket. And my development process is I just develop stuff with myself. So I write my scripts without asking for any finance for writing. I just do it for myself and get it to the best place that I can imagine the film being, and then go in and say, it's not going to get any better than this, yes or no. Instead of, here's a rough first draft, what do you think? Well, here's a synopsis. Because then, if you're going at synopsis stage, I think it's like, that's pretty dangerous, because then that gives them all the opportunity in the world to give you notes and to change everything. Whereas if you spend 2 years writing the script by yourself, in your spare time, which is what I did, I was working and then writing, then go in with something that's really solid, then it doesn't give them much opportunity to mess it up. But it's also, this is the real world, so I understand it's like, it's hard to work and also write something and spend all that time.
Would you ever let anyone direct something that you've written?
I've thought about it, and I don't think I'm emotionally stable enough to let that happen. I'm already shoulders hurting just at the suggestion.
Oh, I've got a microphone there.
Hey, how does your work as a scriptwriter affect you when you're working on something like Thor or The Mandalorian, where you're coming in as a director for hire, but obviously you write and you write well. So how does that affect?
It was challenging for me on Thor. It was challenging because, again, like I wanted to control all of those elements, and having a script come in that was not really in my style. It was a good script, but it wasn't my style. Like, so I found that hard. But I always get to do passes on script, so that was built into my contract on Thor. Was I could do a part, like a story pass and dialogue pass and stuff, and change a lot of things. And so, for instance, like Korg was that character. I basically they said, oh, they've got this rock character, now we'll maybe put him in for one scene. I was like, yeah, sounds good. Maybe I can play that character. Like, yeah, sure. And then I did my pass on the script. They're like,
Okay.
this character is in this movie quite a lot. And, so yeah, but then something like Mandalorian, which I'm really just directing on that, and that's actually quite nice for me just to, because if it's a good script, then I feel like I can concentrate more on the directing instead of freaking out every day and like changing, like writing on set and going, oh, okay, say this, and I just can concentrate on what it looks like.
Hi, Taika. I'm over here.
Hi.
Hello. I remember reading somewhere that you were really inspired by Akira when you were younger watching it. Is there anything that you watched when you were young, anything else you watched when you were younger or even more recently that you felt really inspired by?
Yeah, the films that inspired a lot of my stuff. You can see it because I've ripped them off in every single movie. Badlands, The Graduate, now and then Days of Heaven, just only if the sun's in the right place. And then,
Is there anything recently that you wish you'd written?
I wish I'd written. I really loved Death of Stalin. So that was great writing. If it was written, who knows? But yeah, no, I love all his stuff, and I think it's like there was just like the dialogue's just smart, and then also I thought Get Out was like brilliant, and I thought that just in terms of writing, it was like really just streamlined and perfect. Yes.
Or one. Oh, right here. Sorry.
For the next generation of New Zealand filmmakers, have you got any advice in general, or do you think that it needs to go in any? Do you think it needs to go in any direction, or just any advice?
I think it's going to evolve into a different. Like, I don't think I'm not sure. Like, there's. I don't know. I don't think like. I can't all make films like my films because there's only. I think you can only handle a certain amount of the style, because yeah. So I'd say like there are different directions that New Zealand film is going to head in. I can't really predict where that is. I know that everyone's trying to make horrors at the moment, and that's like a big thing, which I don't mind. I don't really know how I would be able to make a horror. It just wouldn't be scary. But I think advice for any young filmmaker, and even in New Zealand, is just my thing is like it's basically stick to a vision. You stick to your vision, and I'm always very wary about giving advice because I was dictated to a lot when I first started by the older generation of filmmakers, and now I realise I shouldn't have listened to them in the first. With my first short films and stuff, like the 2 Cars One Night, there's edits in that which I instinctively knew I wanted to do a certain thing in the film, but I was convinced by people who had more experience not to do them and to edit things in a certain way, and then only like a year or 2 later, like realised like, damn, I was right. I shouldn't have listened to them. And then that was a big lesson for me, and I started just deciding to stick to what I instinctively wanted, and to really just question, because it's just someone's opinion, and it doesn't matter what their experience is. You got to sort of filter it, really. Take some experience if it really makes sense. Take some advice if it really makes sense, but also listen to yourself. Like, you're not gonna. That's why I think like if my films fail, it's because of me. Not because I can't. I like having the excuse that if something I do is a failure, it's all my fault. Instead of I don't want to have the excuse of but he told me that I should do that because that's just being weak and and not sticking to your guns.
Do you think we're doing something then like Thor? And having that kind of $180 million, and then obviously you were probably getting offered and doing things there of maybe not of that scale, but could your voice get lost?
Oh, it can definitely get lost, but that's also the thing. I knew going into Thor that my strength was not action movies or superhero movies. My strength was tone and character and dialogue and moments, and so I just concentrated on that stuff, on my strengths, knowing that this was the 17th movie in a run that had 17 consecutive box office hits. So I thought, okay, you guys probably know what you're doing in that department. I'll just try and inject this tone into the thing. And but if I had tried to like come in and reinvent the genre or anything, I would have been, fell on my ass pretty quick, I think.
You're obviously a fan of Malik and improvisation. Like you said, you were improvising a lot in the vampire movie. Is that something? good practice as a writer is to get behind the camera and actually start making shorts. Whether you've got a desire to become a director, actually just to get behind the camera and make shorts. Because I've started doing that myself just to kind of prove that it works on screen. Because you get people read your script and they say, well, this doesn't work on screen. And do you think that's good practice just in general to get behind the camera and get noticed that way? And
yeah, I do. I think it's important for it to know all the departments, even though I only learned what a techno crane was, like last year. But like, it's important to know as much as possible all of the departments and how everything works, but also, to figure out how. I think a lot of actors don't understand what goes into making. If they're there for the moment, and they go like, yeah, but how do I look cool? And that's their thing. Whereas they don't really understand, like, if you want them to say a certain thing or a certain way, like, that it fits into this giant puzzle that they're not aware of. And so for me, coming from acting into filmmaking and putting together a short film, I started realizing, oh yeah, this is a massive, like, Rubik's Cube, where you just, there's so many things to think about. And then also, I've changed so much in terms of, like, the kind of stories I wanted to tell, and I was very self-centered in the early days, where I was just like, just my vision and it's my story, and if the audience doesn't get it, well, they're just dumb. Like, but you just can't think like that. Like, it's not. I mean, some people can and get away with it, but you have to consider the audience. Like, that's basically the first thing I consider now, is what the audience experience is going to be, and when is the audience's bladder at bursting point? When are they sitting there going, oh, fuck, I just need to go to the toilet. I can't concentrate on the story anymore. Like, you have to think about that stuff, and like, when are they bored? When are they, like, you might think just because, this thing happened to you in your childhood that this is like everyone else in the world is going to love it. No one gives a shit about your childhood. Like, they just want a good story. So I had to, like, sort of rethink the way I was approaching story and just realize, there's good stories to be told, but also it's entertainment, and it's, you have to actually, you're serving the audience. So they are paying $18 nowadays probably, for the right to come in and observe and criticize your work, and you can't get upset with them if they don't like it. You've got to work your hardest to try and make something that is a gift to them and that they are satisfied with at the end.
Basically, all the questions I was planning on asking, you've already answered them. So I'm just going to go to my backup question, which is, I've noticed that you kind of use the same actors recurrently in all your films. And is that to do with the fact that you're very inspired by, obviously, your homeland, New Zealand, and you kind of want to incorporate that by just adding the same New Zealand actors throughout your films that you're making? Yeah,
and a lot of it is just from my theatre days, just working in co-ops and stuff, and working with your friends, and then you develop a shorthand. Where I love working with actors who I know well, because you can just get past all the bullshit and just say, that was boring. Do it again. Instead of like, let's just talk about. I see what you're doing there. It was really great, but is there another way we can sort of get it? Sort of like let's make it more of a dance. It's like it's just better. Go, that was shitty. Do it again. Make it better, and say it faster. That's it. And because then when you get past that, people are just like, oh, okay, great, yeah, I know. And then I encourage them to give me shit as well. Like, I'll say, and often my friends will be like, that's your direction. That's your big direction. And so,
are you writing with them in mind as well?
A lot of them, yeah. But it just makes my job easier, and it's a lot faster for me as well to work, instead of having to have conversations about, it's worse if with an actor who does 100 takes when they want to, and there's no difference.
Hi. You talked about your background as a visual artist. I was wondering how that informs your screenwriting. Do you start with a really visual idea, or is it more character and dialogue based, and does the vision, like the visual part develop later?
It's a mix. Definitely visual. I'd spend a lot of time making a playlist, listening to a playlist when I write. But I definitely have done that, and all my films had songs in mind that I've written into the scripts, and often I can't afford them. So that's just so it's a nice dream to have. But yeah, so I'll do that. So it's a mixture of that and then visually like a lot of like images or photos or things. You know, like I'll just see some really like I'll collect like a lot of images and just have like big folders of things I can just look at, and sometimes they're just really weird and don't really inspire anything. Other times they might just give you an idea of a setting or something, you know. But for the most part, I try and watch films. But I try and watch old films really to give me ideas, because I feel a bit too close to contemporary cinema to be like looking at things and then stealing. You know, I'd rather steal from something really old, because it's harder for people to find out.
On a similar sort of note, I'm interested in your writing process. So when you go from having the first germ of an idea for something to writing your first draft, do you spend a lot of time sort of really digging into and thinking you really, really know your characters inside out before you start that first draft, and do you outline and do a treatment and know every scene? Or do you just kind of crack on with your first draft and then rewrite?
Yeah, I do the lots of notes and beats and like try and figure out the story before typing, because I find that typing is really horrible, and it just hurts your body and your mind. To sit in front of a blank screen and now what's next? I like to just have the whole plan out in front of me and know. And basically how I write is I'll start with the beginning and the end. I just want to really like visually, or like just something that I think is like, this would be a cool way to end a movie, and this would be a cool last image for an audience to see. This would be a cool first image, and this would be a cool way to open a film. And then I'll put in some scenes throughout. I think this would be a great scene. And then eventually, when I've got enough of these scenes or sequences, then lazily just glue them all together with some sort of connecting scenes. But that's it, really. That's sort of that's my style. And when I know what it is, then I can write really fast. But if I'm just sitting there with, like, if you were to say, hey, write a story about, you know, a soothsayer on a mission to find some herbs in a fantasy land, and then I just had to just look at a blank page, I'd be there for a year without typing anything, unless I sat down and like wrote out and figured it all out before. Who's next?
Mic
Who's got
up
the mic?
there, and then there's a mic.
Oh, you can
down
just
here.
yell it out.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got the mic, so
It's me.
she's got the mic.
I'm coming from Paris, so just for you, so it's my turn to speak.
Yes.
I'm Wendy from Twitter. I don't know if you remember, I sent you stuff. So I have many things to say to you, but I just want to say that you are a daily inspiration, and you are the best role model I could hope for. And my question is, what were your inspiration for Jojo Rabbit, except the book Cage Skies? Sorry, I have a letter for you after to give you. I have anything to say.
Good. So Jojo Rabbit is a film that, just for those of you who don't know, it's a film that I've just shot and I'm editing at the moment. It's set in World War II, and it's what do you call it? What do I say? It's not a comedy. It's a art comedy. No, it's an emotional comedy. What did we say it was? Smart comedy.
Dramedy.
A dramedy. About a little boy in the Hitler Youth who's trying to be the best Nazi he can.
And you're in it.
And I'm in it.
And you play
Hitler. And that's it. That's it. Spoiler alert. They lose.
With Jojo Rabbit. So, when did you start writing? What?
I started
prequel,
writing
yeah?
in 2011.
Yeah.
And then shot this year. So
And
I
did you
think basically all of my scripts have taken about over 6 years.
And do you write then? Does that mean that you're writing 3 or 4 on the go always?
Well, I wrote that, and then I went and made What We Do in the Shadows and Wilderpeople and Thor, and then came back and shot this year. But that's the way I prefer to write. And this is my little trick that none of you will want to do. I will write a draft, and then I'll put it away for a year or so, and then or even 2 years, or even 3 years. And then I'll come back to it, and I'll read it, and I go, who wrote this shit? And then I will read it like maybe 2 or 3 times, and then I will throw that away, and then rewrite it from page 1 based on the memory of what I read. And then my 120-page script will suddenly be 80 pages, and it'll just be the bare bones and just like the important parts, or the things that I can remember from reading the script. And so I think that's quite a good filter system. And then when you have like this very sort of bare bones short version of your story, then you can add back in some tonal stuff and some more jokes and shit and stuff like that. But yeah, so that takes way longer than anyone wants to do.
How many of those scripts do you have in the drawer? Like, how many do you have?
Well, I just put them in a
chest.
A little drive, and then put that somewhere. Well, I don't want to throw it away. But I make sure I don't look at it again.
Yeah.
Hello, I traveled all the way from Siberia to ask you this question. But no, a very serious one. How many hours of actual typing can you do in a day? And do you also call procrastination important research?
I don't call it important research. Well, who knows? I mean, I end up... So, for instance, and then the character turns up and is Trans Am. I must look at Trans Ams. And then I'll spend 3 hours looking at Trans Ams and then try and buy one. And then, because I think I need to own one to know if the character should drive one. And then eventually I'll say, what am I doing? What? He should just drive a Toyota. And then I'll get back into things. But, so it's useless for the script, but it's good for me to know more about Trans Ams, in case I ever need to talk about Trans Ams. And so I try my hardest to turn the internet off when I'm writing. But in terms of hours of typing, I try and spend hardly any hours typing. I really do. I do have like that, like, what do you call it here? OSH. RSI. I get that a bit when I'm typing, I just don't like it. So I try and like, okay, now I know what I'm going to write, and then I'll stop. But maybe 3 hours a day.
Do you ever leave?
Is that lazy? Is it? I don't know. I don't know what anyone else does.
Do you ever stop halfway through knowing what you're actually writing, so you've got something to pick up on the next day?
No. Sometimes I used to do this thing, a friend of mine came up with this really great system, which is when he was writing multiple things. So sometimes I'm writing multiple scripts, which is, this is a good system. So you break up your workload into 20-minute breaks, and you set a time for 20 minutes, and at the end of that 20 minutes, then you force yourself to move on to the next script. And then after that 20 minutes, you force yourself to move on to the next project. So maybe you do that with 3 things. So every hour you're working 20 minutes on 3 projects. Then what's good about it is you've only spent 40 minutes away from the original project. And so at the end of that 40 minutes, you still remember what ideas you left off at. So it's not like, I was really need to finish this idea and give myself another 10 minutes. If you just force yourself to stop, you won't forget where you were and you'll go on to the next thing. And I found that that's quite good if you're under pressure to write lots of stuff at the same time. Try it.
Hello. Sorry, apologies if hi. Apologies if this is a bit dull and specific, but when you're acting on screen and when you're directing at the same time, how do you manage that? Do you storyboard it very precisely beforehand? Do you watch back every take? Or do you sometimes say, that felt right, let's use it, and hope there's no nasty surprises in the edit?
Yeah, that's the third one.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there's usually not enough time for me to watch stuff back. And also I don't like watching any of that stuff. I find it very cringy. It's cringy enough being in your own movie. I mean, that's just tacky. Then to have the audacity to then watch yourself back in front of the crew and go like, just watch it again. Everyone, no, it's embarrassing enough. Putting yourself in your own stuff. So
Are you going to keep doing it, though?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, I love myself. I think I'm a very, very good actor. But someone's left. So, yeah, but I learned to really trust all the people around me. So, especially the DP in my first, and having people around who had permission to say that was terrible. You know, if they really felt it, like, you know, I can trust people to say that to me and not feel bad about it. Because 80% of the time, it probably is bad. Because I'm not thinking, like, you know, like most actors have the time to just actually think solidly just about that thing. And whereas that's why I make sure that my characters aren't like the main character, or they're not, they don't carry the story dramatically so much. They're just like silly characters where I can get away with that. Like Kevin Costner.
I've got one last question.
What are you laughing at? Me checking my watch.
Hi, so I'm here all the way from sunny Brighton, which shows, I think, more dedication than coming from France. So my question to you is, you mentioned the importance of shitty jobs, and having just come from my shitty job this morning, I was wondering which of those experiences has most influenced your work and which has had the most lasting impact on you?
I mean, I've done so many dumb jobs. But not that, you know, it's probably unfair to say they're dumb. They were all very rewarding in some ways, and definitely earning money was great. But I'd say that hospitality was, for me, like, I think that's why so many actors do it as well. Like, you're basically performing all day for people and trying out different characters a lot of times. You know, you go to different tables and try different, you know, you'd like put on a stupid voice, or you try and entertain them, or you'd be grumpy and you'd be pissed off and you'd just be an asshole to some tables. And so then you'll be also like meeting different characters at all these tables. So it taught me a lot about observing people and listening to conversations and stealing. That's the other big thing I do, steal people's conversations. And if you don't know them, that's even better. Because they can't find out that you stole it. Like, yeah, that's why over here I like listening to people and like listening to arguments in cafes and stuff. And just observing body language in restaurants is amazing. Like, you've all done it. You'll sit there and you like look over at these tables and it's like, is it a first date? Are they breaking up? What's going on? And you just observe the body language. You know, just without even hearing what they're saying, you can really tell a lot by just how tense someone is, or how relaxed someone is, or, you know. So I think, yeah, for what I do now, probably the restaurant industry was the best thing.
I think we may be out of time. I'm really sorry we didn't get to see Two Cars One Night.
Well, it's on the internet.
It is. It's on YouTube.
With sound.
Yeah, I would recommend watching it, as it really does give it's brilliant, but also it gives an indication of where you go as a filmmaker, I think.
It is good. Yeah, it's my first film, and it's a good. I haven't watched it since 2005 probably, and just seeing a little bit there, I couldn't. I mean, I still can't watch it, but I think it's a good thing to see. Yeah, just like how something can begin, evolve. And then how, and I guess where I'm at now. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you guys for having me. It's been a real pleasure to come here and visit this fine city, and I hope that there was some sort of anything useful in this conversation, but I really appreciate you taking your time to come out today.
Thank you, Taika Waititi.